Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at the investment markets. Certainly reporting season in the US has been pretty encouraging, really. Many of the companies have sort of beat their sort of estimates. Some of the big global techs, while performing slightly better, revenue growth has sort of slowed down a little bit, and that's concerned some of the investors. But again, maybe some of the analysts were just expecting too much. I mean, some of these companies have been growing at sort of 35%. That's clearly unsustainable over the longer term. And so they've dropped back to maybe sort of 17, 18% growth. But interestingly, those sort of profit margins are starting to increase. So certainly overall, US equity is still holding a pretty decent bid out there. And that's sort of helping the global equity markets. Now we will get a further test on the US economy at the end of this week with the latest employment data. And it's just going to be very interesting to see how that sort of plays out. Currently running at a sort of 12-month average of around a sort of 170, 180,000 jobs created every month. Now, as long as that still keeps sort of ticking away, and inflation does seem pretty benign in the US, it's pretty hard for the Fed to make a case for raising interest rates. Oil initially came down a little bit after President Trump was again on the sort of tweet accusing OPEC of sort of higher prices and really sort of blaming them for the higher prices and really saying that oil prices should be driven down. But events in Venezuela now, where it looks like potentially a military coup, is sort of starting to put a little bit of pressure, upward pressure on the oil prices again. Looks like we are getting closer to that sort of China trade deal. As discussed here many times, both sides need the deal, and it's just a question of how you can come up with a deal where both sides appear to sort of keep face without appearing to have given in to each other. The revolving door in the Trump administration is still alive and kicking. Rod Rosenthal has now announced that he will be leaving the administration. And it's just going to be interesting to see who Trump gets to replace him. So as well, President Trump fighting an increasing number of battles on his tax front as well. Potentially Deutsche Bank now are going to release some details on his tax issues. And Trump is now looking at suing Deutsche Bank to prevent the release of those details that have been requested by Congress. I think watch this space. It could be quite interesting if Deutsche Bank do release those details. President Trump has fought a pretty hard battle to keep his tax details sort of personal and private, and it'll just be very interesting again to see how this sort of plays through. No sort of fresh news on Brexit. That still sort of rumbles through, and it's just going to be interesting to see how that does sort of play out. Australia is starting to heat up on the election front. It's just going to be very interesting to see how that all sort of plays out. Here in New Zealand, certainly the housing market is coming off the boil a little bit, but again, with inflation pretty benign, Reserve Bank sort of pointing to the fact that rates are going to be on hold now for some considerable time, and potentially could even see the next move down. Now, if that is the case, and you do see a cut in interest rates, mortgage rates will come under a little bit of pressure on the downside, and that should again sort of keep the housing market not so much sort of on a tear, but really just sort of keep a decent underlying bid out there. Government's still facing a few pressures on their wage negotiations. Doctors and sort of healthcare certainly sort of front and foremost at present. And as we head into the end of June now, pretty important to check those KiwiSaver balances just to make sure you've contributed enough to get that maximum tax credit. If you're unsure on what those numbers are, call us on 0800 867 323. And if you are looking for income options, as I said, there's plenty of alternatives available. Call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.